welcome back to another episode of the Prometheus Podcast. I'm joined today with Hendry and Luke. How you boys doing today?
Pretty good, man. It's the weekend, so it's always good, right?
Yeah.
You can't complain about that.
That's it.
Only can complain about the weather since it's always cold now.
Oh, it's freezing.
Yeah. Pretty rough, you know.
Rough.
Got pretty probably worked myself to sickness.
Yeah.
Just the other day, so immune system fell a bit, but I swear though, when I was sleeping and woke up this morning, I could barely sleep last night, and then probably on like my fifth attempt, just woke up thinking it's been 14 months. Just you know when you wake up and you just got no idea where you are. What you're doing.
Lost track of time.
Yeah, so that was me this morning, but yeah, battling through.
No longer immortal.
That's it, no longer. Have you been going?
Yeah, I mean, like just as the rain starts, I've been alright. I think I had a bit of a similar situation to you, like with the uni stuff. It's on the tail end of the semester now, so been busy with that, and probably just haven't been getting as much sleep as I need. I'm a pretty bad sleeper, so it's hard for me to. I'm so jealous of people who can just put their head on the pillow and sleep. Like, it doesn't matter how tired I am. It doesn't matter if my eyes are bleeding. I'll put my head on the pillow and I'll just sit there for like an hour, just sitting. So
I'm similar to that. I hate it with a passion when people can just out like that.
Yeah,
I'm very envious.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sick yet, but my body is compromised. So it's fighting.
Yeah, well, that's what you got to look out for though, because the worst part in winter is if you let your immune system go down a little bit, then you just get hit with everything at once.
Yeah.
Because of the weather.
Yep.
And like everyone else is crook as well.
Yeah, everyone else is sick. Everyone else is taking time off work.
So you've just been studying?
Yeah, studying, doing a lot of like MMA fighting stuff. So that probably didn't help. So I was like starting to get sick. I was so tired. I was like, let's just do 3 hours, three back-to-back classes. But I think that's what the weekend's for. It's for sleep, for recovery.
For recovery.
So thankfully you boys agreed to not make me wake up too early this time.
The early starts are the best starts there.
I didn't know what to do with myself. I just woke up at 6:30 because I couldn't go back to sleep because I was sick. So I was just like, just laying in bed for like an hour straight.
You're like, is anyone awake?
That's it.
We'll get some tranquilizers for you, Luke.
Yeah, the last needs. But so you unfortunately missed out on this, but me and you, Hendry, went to Akala, which was a pretty mad night. So I'll just fill you in with that for a bit.
Please do.
Yeah, so he had a book tour first. So he talked about a few things, but mostly about his book. It's called Natives. It's about race and class in empires, is what he discusses about. So yeah, that book tour was crazy, and that was Hendry's first, I guess, experience with him. So do you want to just give us a run through with what you were expecting on that book tour and kind of what happened?
Yeah, well, I definitely I've heard of him before, but I didn't really have too high of an expectation because I just honestly didn't know what to expect. But the moment he started speaking, I was like, oh wow, this guy knows what he's talking about, and he's like a super professional, kind of he has so much wisdom and so much knowledge about the different topics.
Yeah.
And all that.
And I think that probably leads to what I wouldn't mind us diving into for today's topic. He, as you said, he's got some crazy knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't just write books. He's mostly a hip hop kind of artist, rapper, but he does a few things. He has a company called the Shakespeare Company. What he does is he teaches Shakespeare in the form of hip hop to kids and students in the UK. And then a few other businesses as well. He has his own library, so he's a very knowledgeable guy. So, and I think a thing about him that separates him from a lot of artists, right, is this whole perspective that he has about the world. So, and you and I have talked about it a bit, Ali, where a lot of students, what they lack is perspective. Whether that's, and perspective could be a number of things, right? So I wouldn't mind if we just dive into this whole topic, because it could be the perspective that I guess they have with them and their surroundings, their environment, being in, coming into their kind of later part of their teenage years or finishing high school, the whole perspective around school, attitude, motivation. You got a whole perspective around just the world itself and your place in the world. It's just this huge topic where I think a lot of people, a lot of the defining factor is perspective, because this artist, even when back in the day when he was at a similar age to us, and he would kind of rap about the stuff that a lot of people rap about now, the kind of whole materialistic stuff, the whole I'm such a bad guy, I'm such a gangster, like that's what kind of rap music kind of is nowadays. But even back then, there was still a hint in his music that he had a bit of a perspective that not too many people had, whereas he understood how the world worked in a sense, how certain kind of systems and barriers are put up for some people, and just kind of how the world is just operated day in, day out as like an entity or a business in a sense. So that perspective is always so interesting, because a lot of people don't have that. And Akala, he's probably in my top 3, if not probably one of my favorite people across history. And like I love Sun Tzu and Elon Musk and a few other people, but this guy's pretty switched on with like the perspective that he has, and it's always interesting because you always have such an interesting perspective for our age as well. So including you, Hendry. So I wouldn't mind us kind of diving into it and just seeing kind of what your thoughts are, perspective with people your age. What perspective you might carry with the world, maybe, or some other kind of systems. So you want to just jump into that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll start with the school stuff then. Well, to me, it's always been, when you're in high school, that's all you've really known. Like schooling is all you've known, because whether you went to kindergarten or not, we all started at prep. And then prep 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So,
Straight up.
Like that's a long time of your life. It's basically, you have like a brief moment of freedom when you're a toddler, but then straight away it's into. A lot of kids are going to like early learning centers now. So a lot of kids, pretty much just right off the bat, like as soon as they're born, into some sort of daycare system, into some sort of institution, and then you're there. You progress until you're age of 18, and then you're like kicked out into the world. and I think that's a really pivotal moment, because you go, and it sounds condescending like on a surface level, because yes, these kids aren't dumb. They're very educated, and a lot of them are very switched on to the way the world works and certain things that perhaps they didn't just pick up straight out of school. But when you've existed inside a certain ecosystem, you don't know what anything other than that is. So you can perhaps, intellectually or just visually perceive, mum and dad are doing this, or my older sister's doing this. So I have a sense of what life after school is. But until you actually graduate, you get that handshake, you get that certificate, and you step out those gates for the last time. Until that moment, it doesn't truly sink in, well, I have a life now that I have to live for the next 80 years. This is such a black and white moment. It's, well, I'm moving on now. How do I carry myself in the world? And how has what I learned translating into the person I need to become, who is well equipped to deal with, the various situations that might be presented.
And I guess with like school, it's like you're so used to just learning something that like no one teaches you like what happens on the outside of the world. You're just like learning maths, you're learning English, humanities, but you're never really taught what really goes on outside. You're not taught finances, you're not taught like how like job interviews, etc. and all that. Like you're not taught like the necessities, like the basic necessities to get through like the start of the journey.
At the very start. And that is perspective in a sense, because you don't actually, like you're saying, you just don't have any perspective of really how the world works straight after high school. And that's probably such a flaw in our educational system, because that's what it's like across the board. Like you speak to anyone in any school, it's kind of always like that. It's so focused, like you're saying, you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You pushed out the door, and it's like, well, here's your certificate, here's a handshake, thank you, good luck. And then you're sitting there like, well, I don't even know what the.
And that's probably why a lot of people who shouldn't be going to uni go to uni, because it's a way to buy time essentially. So and I've said this 100 times before on the podcast, it's extending the ladder, it's extending the staircase. So you've got to the end of the staircase, there's no more stairs. So you have to go out, you have to do something now. But if you don't feel well equipped to deal with that level, then you just keep walking up the staircase, right? So you go to uni, and again, uni definitely is for a lot of people, but there's a portion of people who, had they been well equipped at the end of high school, had they known, people skills, they would have known how to start a business, how finances worked. They might have seen that not as, just a way to buy time, but they would have actually felt equipped to, straight from the get, go out and pursue something else that would have been more fulfilling to them. But since they didn't have that skill set, they just weren't equipped to deal with that situation. They've gravitated to what everyone else was doing simply because it bought them time. It just extended that period of reflection where they didn't have to go ahead and start making
decisions. And I guess the thing is, it's when you're going through school, you're not really open to many things. You're not really trying multiple things, so you don't really know what you really want to do when you come out. And I guess it's kind of like when you get out of school, that's when you try and dip your feet around different things, and that's when you try different things. Whereas if you tried things back in high school, you worked there, or you got an idea of how this job worked, then I feel like you're more equipped as you come out.
Yeah, actually having a job and all that, and doing some stuff before you finish high school.
Oh, no, it's not necessarily that. It's trying, hanging out with someone from that field of work, or learning,
exposing
yourself. That's it.
And that's a huge one, because exposure is kind of what always shifts perspective, because you always don't know what you don't know. And like you're saying, when you're surrounding yourself in that environment for so long, you're just only exposed to certain things. So going back to perspective, and we'll probably dip on exposure later as I mix my little drink. But if perspective is kind of what people lack, because I know you two personally, so I know you've always had a different perspective on the world than maybe the people you normally hang out with. So do you have something that, I guess, was your defining factor, or do you have a certain perspective of yourself in the world that you carry yourself different to everyone else? How does that all kind of come into play with it all? If you were to say, if we're going with the idea which we talk about heavily, which is a lot of students lack perspective, and this is where they come across multiple struggles, whether it's finding their career that they want to do, finding their way once their friendships disappear, finding themselves just in the world generally. If perspective is something that they lack, why did you have a certain perspective when you were in high school or finishing high school?
Well, for me, it would have just been that perspective was kind of born out of anger and hatred and just negative emotion, a lot of negative emotion. And I had that for a lot of my childhood, even before high school, at the end of primary school, start of high school. That whole time was a very negative period for me. So I was generating just inside of me just lots of anger and hatred towards, it was almost a blind rage towards all things. And in part of that process, I became detached from my environment. I kind of began to disassociate from things. And when that happened to me, I was able to see everyone around me kind of more clearly, because rather than being in the room or being at school, I just kind of felt as if I was a camera and I was just recording things. It didn't feel, because I had lost all sense of identity. I just became this ball of sadness, to put it.
Spectator.
So I was just there watching everyone else, quite passively. And when I was just watching everyone around me, that's when I began to have insights into, well, why do people act in this way? Why are things the way they are? And I remember
this is gonna blow off.
And I actually remember in year 7 being so aware, I guess, of how everyone else was acting. And there's a mutual friend that we all have, and he might actually be watching this. I I remember I sat down with him in year 7, and he was a good kid. He was also from a migrant family, and he just completely fell in with the wrong crowd. He was wasting his time, and this was in year 7, so everyone was wasting time.
We're kids.
But for whatever reason, because I had that perspective, and I guess that anger inside of me, I saw what he was doing. And yeah, he was just being innocent, he was having fun, but I could tell that if he kept going on that road, I had the foresight to understand that it wouldn't end well for him. He would be derailing himself from his potential path, which I saw was quite a positive thing, because I knew he had strengths in him, but he was foregoing those strengths just for popularity or just to hang out with the guys who had the girls around them. And I sat down with him in year 7 and I spoke to him, and I just went wizard on him. I just said, your parents came here, they sacrificed so much, they left their family, their friends, they did everything they could to give you the life that you have right now. And rather than studying, rather than focusing on what's happening in class, you're with these these losers, just pursuing girls, just trying to disrupt the class, just trying to have fun, just being just inconsiderate, both of your time, other people's time, and most importantly, the people who love you most, your family, because they've sacrificed everything for this time, and you're not making the most of it. And I went on that spiel, being 12 years old, to him, and he just started crying in class. And I felt bad. I didn't mean to make you cry. But he didn't cry because I was yelling at him or anything. He cried because he understood the truth of what I was saying, and it impacted him. And that for him was, and he still, I guess, got a little bit lost along the way. But I think, and I hope that conversation at least had some sort of an impact on him.
Resonates with him.
Going forward, because it was real. And having that perspective I had, again, I wouldn't wish the process I've gone on anyone, because it was just, like, I didn't have a childhood. I didn't have an adolescence. I didn't get to have fun. I didn't get to have enjoyment or happiness, because that was the cost that I had to pay to be the person I am now. And yes, people might look at me and say, oh, you're so wise, you know so many things, you have such a good perspective, as you're saying, Luke. But what did I pay for that perspective? I paid the first 18 years of my life for that perspective that I'm only just implementing now in the 3 years since I've left high school, So that's what I paid. And I don't think most people should pay that cost, but I had to. I didn't have a choice. And that's just who I've become.
I think for me, it's like, I kind of took we'll go back a little bit. So from everything that I went through at the start of my life, I think I was forced to grow up like super, super quick. And it's like you said, like, you gave up your childhood. I didn't have a childhood. Like, I didn't have a teenagehood, really. And it's like, now it's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get into life. But I think from everything that I went through, it allowed me to view everything from like a bird's eye view, kind of like what you were saying, like a camera. And I think for me, it's like, I noticed everyone who was older, just like you said, like, just going out, just doing whatever, just like being, trying to have some fun in life. But I think for them, for me, I kind of realized that, like, everyone's doing this, but once they get out, they don't really know what they're doing. They just kind of like, oh, I'll just get this job here, or I'll go to uni, but then I'll switch to this course, and then I'll switch to that course, and everyone's kind of lost. And I think for me, it clicked that it's like, that's not really what I want to be doing. It's like, I want to have a sort of direction of where I need to head in life. And I think from there, it's like, I kind of like ignored what others would say to me. It's like, oh, like, don't do this, don't do that. It's like, no, I'm going to do that because it's like, that's what I really want to be doing. Oh, it's like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll listen to you, but then I'll like go through it, and then I'll be like, oh, this isn't for me. But it's like, at that point, people would be like, oh, it's too late, you're in this like pretty deep, you should stay the whole way. And I'm like, no, I may as well leave now while I'm ahead and trying to get into something else or something like that. So
you saw more. You said something earlier, and it was good. So, and there was that foresight. So you had enough perspective to a bird's eye view, in a sense, to say, hang on, I see where these, like, what the path leads for what you're doing currently. I see where that goes, and that's not necessarily what I want.
It's like you see people from like who's older. It's like, when like back in like high school and all that, it's like once they're done with school, they go to uni, they like come out, they get a full-time job, they get married, and then that's it. That's life. And it's like, I think it clicked in me real early, and I was like, that isn't what I want. That is exactly not what I want.
Yeah.
And I swayed away from that, and by swaying away from that, it allowed me to find this like whole new path, or create my own path in a sense, to get to where I want to be.
Yeah. And I think that perspective is probably a common thing between all of us. Because, I mean, I don't want to dive into all the deep and traumatic childhoods and say that's the only solution.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just like, oh wow. But it's true though, right? So that's what led to it. But then if you look at it through another lens, it's like, well, like what you're saying, you had enough of you could say it's a gift or a skill set or something that you cultivated, right? But you have the ability to go bird's eye. You have the ability to, in a sense, predict the future of saying, well, if I go down this path, it goes back to your order of consequences, right? Mm-hmm. I have enough wisdom to know the 20th consequence. And is that somewhere where I want my life to be? Is that somewhere where I want my life to go? And saying what you were saying, Hendry, you were saying you kind of had that perspective and you were like, well, I want to make my own path because I see how that is set up. So going into a perspective that I had when I was growing up, and I still have it, it's touching on kind of what you talked about. I researched a lot on how kind of the world runs and the systems in place and kind of how this whole world kind of operates in a sense. So I got a lot of perspective there to say, well, there's a lot of systemic issues that society has, and it kind of puts people into the big conveyor belt and cuts them all into the same shape. And that's just kind of the working class mentality that happened through the industrial kind of revolution and just all a bunch of things like that, which we won't go deep into the politics of it all. But like, so I had that perspective to, again, have that foresight to see, well, this is kind of where society wants me to go. This is where life wants me to go. Hang on, is that what I want to do? Is that what I want from my friends and my family and for myself? So that perspective to be able to go bird's eye view gave me that incentive to go, well, I need to put steps in now. And although I'm 7 years old, I need to start kind of working on school holidays and doing a few other things. And then although start of high school, year 7, hang on, let's pour some money, let's start a family business, let's start sacrificing Saturday, Sunday, some days where you, like you're saying, you having fun, having like your childhood days. And I don't want it to all be doom and gloom, but it's just like, all right, well, I see where it heads. I have the bird's eye view. So I want to make sure I put the right stepping stones in place. So when I get out of high school, when I get 20, 25, 30, 40, you're in a position that suits you, not just suits the world around you. And I think a lot of people, when we're talking about perspective, right, and it's that example you used with our friend in high school, it's like you're so kind of brainwashed in a sense, lack of a better word. You kind of like, you're consuming way too much content. There's too much input. You just have, your mind is pretty much just like melted into this zombie state of, well, the music you listen to, the TV shows that you're watching, the news that you're watching, is all telling you how to act and be a certain type of way. And I think a lot of high school students really struggle with that because they don't have perspective bigger than just what they're fed. They don't have a perspective to go bird's eye view and go, hang on, what am I consuming and what am I producing and where do I want my life to go? And yeah, that's where I think a lot of people fail.
I think the thing is, it's like this is gonna go on a long tangent,
but
like the thing is, it's like when you're a child, right, and you're going for primary school, you know, your parents are like, oh, wake up, you know, get dressed, go to school, and then once you're out of, like, you're done with school, right, your parents take you home, and then you sit down, you eat, you watch TV, you kind of do whatever you want to, you know, you go to sleep and you rinse and repeat, right?
Yep.
So now the thing is with high school, it's like you're now dipping yourself into all these different new friendship groups. People are now partying, people are now drinking, you know, you're hanging out with all these social groups. So I think the problem is that kids go to school every single day. So in the morning, you like, if you're walking to school, let's say you listen to music, you go to school, you listen in class, or if you don't listen, you know, you just kind of just sit in there, kind of going through school. But then on your way home, you're just listening to music again. And then once you get home, you're on social media. And I think, like, to me, the problem is that no kid is taking a step back, dipping their feet into all these other little areas to try and gain more insight into how life works. That once they get out of school, they're all like, oh, like how do I function now? It's because no one tried anything when they was younger.
Yeah, they just
Or like they didn't go through anything, so they're now just like, they just went through school, they just partied, they just did whatever they wanted, they just, got the girls, got the guys, if you're, and then once you're out, it's like, oh shit, like I'm in this whole new world, and then I think it goes down on a spiral then of where people get lost and confused as to where life is meant to go for them.
Yeah, they only consumed what, in a sense, society was feeding them. Like you're saying, from the music to the social groups, the partying, the drinking, whatever it is, like that's all expected. That's all kind of, this is how life works. But like what you're saying, they didn't actually deviate. It's just like, oh, okay, this is a new hit song. I'm going to listen to it because everyone's listening to it.
They focus too much on being a kid or a teenager, but like they focused like way too much on that without thinking how life is going to be after school, because once that's all taken away from you, you're all open up to this whole new world, and if you're not prepared for it, then time's just going to pass you by. People are just going to pass you by.
Yeah, and speaking of that perspective, I'm huge on this, and that's, I think it's a wrong narrative that young people are told, right? And it's like, live life when you're young. And I think it's so stupid. It's just like, well, why wouldn't you, if you had to just sacrifice 4 years of your youth to then live life every day, or just live it more on your own terms, wouldn't you rather kind of do that? I think a lot of young people get caught up into that because they're just like, oh, I'm not going to think about the job I want, I'm not going to think about what university I want to go to or what thing I want to study. I'm just going to kind of enjoy life, because come 20 or 21, see ya. You're now into that, like I said, you're in like that conveyor belt of just human factory kind of workers, working class mentality.
Maybe just people just turn a blind eye to things like to the outside world. So when they're young, they're just like, oh, I've got so much time to figure things out. So they just do whatever they want. And I think, just like a friend of mine, it's like, now it's like, she's coming out and of like uni, and she's like, oh, I don't think that was the right uni course. And it's like, she's all on this like lost little path. And it's like, I think you need to take a step back, go on a holiday or do whatever you want. Like, just be at home, but be alone, be in your own thoughts. And I think that will allow you to gain so much more perspective in life, because when you're stuck in your own thoughts, your brain's running like 1,000,000 kilometers or miles or whatever conversion you're using. Like a second that like you just go through everything, and it's just like, life is good, like going this way, but then if I go this way, then I can go that way. It's like you're mapping out everything when you're trapped in your own thoughts, I feel.
Yeah, being more strategic.
Yeah.
Because, you are thinking about it. What's, with all those rants and all that, you got anything to add, Harlan?
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much summed it up, but I liked what you said about how, I hadn't actually thought about it in that way, that we tell young people just live life while they're young, because the rest of your life's going to be terrible. So, so I mean, when you make an investment, you invest early, and then you buy and hold. You if you want to live off those dividends, or you want to see that stock portfolio grow, you buy earlier, then you hold it over time, and the earlier you buy it, theoretically, the bigger in value it's going to be when you sell. Or when you plant a tree, you plant the tree 10 years before you need the tree, because if you're planting the tree the day you need the tree, then tough luck, you got to wait 10 years.
The fruit.
So I think, yes, childhood is, and let's just define childhood as 20 years and before. When you're young, when you're a kid, when you're a child, you're a teenager, yes, you should be living your life, and you shouldn't, there's certain stresses and certain burdens that aren't a child's burden. And those things, of course, we don't want to put on them. Most of us three probably did have those burdens that weren't a child's burden, but that only accelerated our growth. But of course, it's a cost-benefit analysis. Well, not everybody's going to come out as well as we did. Some people will go through that process and come out even more broken rather than stronger. So that's not the debate. The debate is, well, how do we balance that cycle of growth in a way that's not so hedonistic? Because we almost teach our kids to be hedonistic. We tell them, live now, live in the present. just do what you want,
Yeah.
like go out with your friends, and even I think part of it is that Australian culture where we've developed our society on the back of what was once this really pioneering industrial culture where we were building this country up from, after the colonialists came and did their business. But from that point onwards, it's a relatively young nation, right? So it was a nation of blue collar workers who were tradesmen who were establishing, the systems and institutions and the roads and the bridges and the buildings that create, the Australia that we know today. But now there's been a shift where we don't live in that society anymore. We live in a different one. But the culture of, crack a beer once you get home from work because, you've had such a tough day, you deserve it. But was your day that tough anymore?
Yeah.
Back then, when you were laboring for 100 hours a day, building bridges, creating the modern Australia, yeah, sure, you deserved it. But that same culture of, you've earned that cold beer, you've earned that break, you deserve to have that time off. And yes, people do, but I think, I don't know, it's just it's that vibe that children are instilled with, that understanding that yes, I can take this easy. I don't have to consider anything beyond the moment because it is just so simple right now. And rather than using that time of innocence to really lay some solid foundations, it becomes more a question of how can I enjoy this the most? How can I gain the most pleasure out of this? With some sort of belief that it's not going to be there later on when it can be if you plant that tree.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead. No, you got it.
Well, I was just going to say that crack in the cold beer, right? It's I always laugh about it with like high school students and all that, because it's like there's always a party. Like there's a party every single weekend. Everyone feels the need to have to go to every single party, but a party is by definition a celebration, is it not? So it's like, what are you actually celebrating? You haven't done anything. You haven't sure, if you put 100 hours in a day, like you're saying, and you build that bridge, throw a party, celebrate your hard work. But people just it's just that perspective, like you're saying, the vibe is just people will party because there's a party, not because they're celebrating an achievement. It's just, yeah, sure, why not? I exist, so let's crack a cold one and enjoy myself.
Do you guys think that like people are scared to just be alone, and that's why they rather always be hanging out? That's why they rather be always connected through social media?
Yeah, I think so many people have too much baggage that they've never dealt with.
Yeah.
So they would rather do drugs, drink. They would rather always be socializing. Again, we've somewhat touched on it a little bit, but it's why so many people, love partying. They will abuse relationships. They'll just kind of jump in one and jump to the next and jump to the next. They always keep themselves busy, always keep themselves stimulated, so they don't have to sit back in their own thoughts and go, hang on, why do I hate my life so much that I feel the need to go out every Friday night, let loose, go out every Saturday night, let loose? It's just, they're afraid to be by themselves, because whether it's insecurities or just anything else that they haven't actually dealt with properly, they would rather just numb themselves from the pain, or numb themselves to the pain, or whatever English word I was looking for. But they'd rather numb themselves and face the fact, which is you have some stuff going on, so deal with it. Because going out partying isn't going to help. Going out dating 10 chicks is not going to help. You need to actually sit at home, sit by yourself.
Yeah.
And do the actual work, lay that foundation for whatever it is that you are trying to.
I think by just being so connected these days through the internet and through everything, really, it's really hard to kind of gain your own identity in the world, which I don't know, in my opinion, leads to a problem of finding your own perspective of the world, because everyone has their own perspective in this world. Everyone views the world differently, and I think by like relating back to what you guys are saying, like live life while you're young and all that, like parents saying that through social media you're always connected and all that. It's no one takes that step back where they just rather be by themselves. Like, so I don't know, that's my opinion of, like, in order to gain the perspective of like someone else who's trying to pursue something more, or like your own perspective of the world, like you got to be by yourself. But I think the thing to stress with is that even at this age, we're still young. So like, you know, we're still in our early 20s, and like even if you're mid 25s, early 30s, you're still young. Like you've still got time in the world to figure yourself out. So like you shouldn't be too worried about anything else that's going on. Like if you like, like if you're starting to gain like your own perspective, then at like 28, early 30s, like sure you might have a little bit more like things weighing you down or trying to sway you away from that, but like it's not late. Like you still have time to figure out what you really want to get from life. So
well, it's what like Akala said when he was saying something about his 30s and all that, and he's whatever he is, 35 plus or something. And he was saying like, how
his
young
30s
he's
is
still.
his best years.
Yeah. 30s is his best year. But and then going off that though, but I don't think it's not just kind of locking yourself away, because I use social network and I use the internet to gain a lot of perspective on the world, and that's part of what shaped me. And that's how I could find artists like Akala and these other artists who rap about kind of conscious stuff, not just the music I listen to is not stuff about materialistic stuff. It's not things about buying the cars, buying the shoes, buying kind of all
like
of that
the chains
stuff.
And all that.
Exactly. And to use a quote which is deep as, and you would have loved it, Ali. The quote goes, "It's a different whip, but it's the same chains." And it's just kind of that mentality where it's just going off what you were saying. I think that is a solution.
Yeah.
But I certainly, it comes back again using it the right way or the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because you can use it to gain plenty of knowledge, but everyone just uses it for the social norm or to fit in that social norm. That social norm is listen to this new track that is just not even music, it's just random beats, mumble rap, where it's just like stupid lyrics about materialistic stuff. Buy this European vehicle, wear these new clothes, buy these chains, do this and that and that. But it's madness.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like there is like the wrong way, and like, there isn't a wrong way of using like the internet or so, but there is like ways, like you said, to gain more knowledge of the world, to gain, because like even though we're more connected to these days, we're more connected to what actually goes on in the world as well. So you can actually understand a little bit more.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, gaining perspective then, I had a conversation recently with a friend that gave me a unique insight into how people can gain perspective without necessarily having to go through the process of suffering. Because again, we said before how all three of us, we went through certain hardships and certain burdens that weren't necessarily a child's burden to bear. But because of that weight we had to pull, we had to get stronger when we were younger. And that has served us well now. But of course we don't expect, nor would we wish upon children or young people or any of the things that we've gone through, right? No. So
no
exactly.
Way. No way.
So I was having a chat with Matt Rogers actually. So he's been on the podcast
it's
before.
The family of the podcast.
Yeah. So quick. We need to explain who he is, but that's not the purpose of this conversation. But we've given the man enough free promotion. But anyways, I was having a conversation with him a couple of days ago, and I was speaking to him about why I started, like I took up fighting, like why I started training to learn how to fight, and I was telling him how it was the most opposite thing to me I could think of, and that's why I needed to do it, because we all have these demons inside of us, right? And certain weaknesses, and half the time you can't tell if the lifestyle you've developed is starving or feeding those demons. Because again, we live in a certain narrative of ourselves. We live in a certain storyline, right? So we tend to just stick to that. We don't usually go off and do something that's completely out of character for us. And that was the insight I had, because if you're constantly staying in character, well, how much of those demons are part of that character now? And if you want to fight those off or grow fundamentally as a person and truly push the needle forward and become someone else, you can't always just be staying in character. You have to do something that is uncharacteristic of you. And And to me, the most uncharacteristic thing I could think of was fighting, because I'm super I just hate conflict. I don't like dealing with it. So I thought, well, the most craziest thing I could learn to do is learn how to fight, to actually be in conflict. So that's what I went and did. And I do think that it's been beneficial in helping me grow and overcome certain limitations I had. So I was having a conversation with him, and I said, well, I've done this. What is your opposite? What is the least likely thing that you could have ever done? What is completely uncharacteristic of you?
Yeah.
And he said, well, for me, it's running. I hate running. I've never run. I've never had the stamina to do that type of thing. It's never been something I wanted to do. I've always hated it. And then right then and there, I said, all right, you're signing up for the Melbourne Marathon. And he said, what? He said, yeah, get your phone out. You're signing up for the Melbourne Marathon. He's like, okay. So he took his phone out, and Melbourne Marathon is happening in October.
Good luck, Matt.
So
Best of luck.
Yeah. So again, the same wizard that made the 12-year-old friend mate cry was the same wizard that came out during that dinner. And I spoke to him. I said, well, if you found a huge amount of success, you've got a lot of the skill sets that other people don't have, so you're already ahead of the pack. But why stop? Why not keep going? Because again, just because you're doing well doesn't mean you don't have demons inside you. Just because you've found you've carved out a small life or a way of existing doesn't mean that you don't have baggage that you might not even know about. So to me, the way you overcome that baggage is you look in the mirror, but you kind of have to become your reflection to look back. So if your reflection is the thing that's opposite looking back at you, how do you become that? You do that by being the opposite of what you are, pursuing something that's completely different. So he signed up, and now he's training to run the marathon. So
that's so good.
And again, that's a huge testament to him, because he did it. I said that to him. I said, all right, you're running a Melbourne Marathon. And he said, fair enough. I'm doing that. And that's all it takes. That is unbelievable growth is on the other side of just saying yes to stuff like that. Because it's going to be a challenge. He only has maybe, he doesn't have that long to train for it.
Can't even count.
especially since he's not a runner, running a marathon within like basically less than 6 months of like training for it. It's definitely possible, but it's going to be a challenge for him. But the fact that he was able to just say, okay, I'll do it. That's night and day. That is death and life. That is being the person you are and the person you could be. That is
huge character development.
That's it. It's just seeing that challenge and just stepping up to it. Just seeing that and going, all right, sure, I'll do it. Watch me. And that's how you win. That's the winning mentality. That's why he is doing so well, and that's the thing that we all need to adopt. If you don't want to sell your childhood and be damaged be damaged in that way, well, this is how you can do it. It's get that perspective instead of having to suffer and then being able to zoom out. You can just bypass that completely. But in order to do that, you have to do the same thing that the suffering is doing to you. So the suffering causes you to zoom out, reassess, and see who you are as a person, right? And it's forcing you to reevaluate in a way that isn't natural to who you are if you are just living that hedonistic, joyful life where everything's great, so you don't need to think about stuff. But if you're challenging yourself in that way and completely flipping your script, well, then you're doing the same thing. But it's just a lot less painful. You're zooming out and going, all right, this is something I would have never done. This falls completely outside of my qualification, outside of my skill set. But because it is so daunting and because it is so, it's like my antidote, it's just the complete opposite thing. It's not who I am, but then become that and then grow and expand. And that's how you change your life.
I think that's like pretty similar to me. It's like, if you guys remember back to like when we first met or something, it's like just a really skinny kid in like high school. I think it's like doing something that you're not really like familiar with or comfortable with. For me, that was the gym. And when I like was in year 12 or so, I was like, oh yeah, I should probably start getting into fitness, try, improve my body and try improve my health in a sense. And it wasn't until that I like finished high school that I was like, oh shit, I better like actually get into this. But the thing that swayed me away from getting into working out or something in the first round is because I was scared of what people would think of me. I was scared of like, oh, like if I'm just lifting weights and like, what if there's like this really buff guy next to me at the gym, and it's like I'm just this skinny dude trying to like, put on some weight. Yeah. But it's like I found the comfort in the uncomfortable state that I was like, well, ease yourself into it first. And I was like, start weight training like every few days, but now it's like it's part of my daily life now. It's like I'm constantly working out, and I think like it's so cool that like Matt's just like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, because he didn't even think about it, right? He's just like, yeah, I'll do it, and that leads to huge character development, which will then help you later on in life, like you were saying, like flipping the script, which
to gain that extra perspective without suffering, I think is a huge, like it's such a huge gem, because again, once you go through that pain or you fall or you go through those losses, they're always the biggest character development, like in any story. Like it's I think humans love it, like you go through a loss and you come back twice as strong. Like it's just such a enticing narrative for everyone, because everyone can relate. Everyone can relate to failing the test and going again, failing your license and going again, not getting the job, not getting the job, not getting the job, and then getting the job. Like it's a nice feel good 100%. If they can do it, I can do it. And we relate as humans when people go through those failures, because again, it's just like looking into a mirror. But to be able to, and I think you're spot on. That's like the formula that you want to cultivate. If you've had it, we mentioned it last episode, right? We all start in the race at different times. So you can't, if you are someone who has a lot of opportunities and you're very fortunate because of your upbringing, like that just is what it is. You shouldn't feel bad about that. It just is what it is. But if you had it very comfortable, then there's no reason why you can't just, like you're saying, you look at the other end of the spectrum and then go, well, that's what I want to do, because that's going to help me stretch and help me grow. Because if it's a way to bypass the pain, then happy days. There shouldn't be any excuse for it, because perspective is so important, and you need to have it. And what we've just talked about is you want to be able to have the perspective, right? And that comes through a bit of exposure, dipping your feet in different things. And exposure is exactly what that is when you tackle that other end of the spectrum, because you're not exposed to everything on this side. You're exposed to everything on your side. So if you're stretching it 100% or 180 to the other end is what brings you enormous growth, then go for it, because that lays then the foundation. And that's what's so important, because like what you're saying, the world itself just feeds you so much information that says you need to live a certain way, go to school, do this, do that, listen to music, like what we've all talked about. So being able to have that greater perspective helps you in the long run, because you're not strung up by society's norms, you're not strung up by society's needs. Like you make your own decision because you're trying to stretch yourself that certain way. Yeah,
and suffering it's not the sustainable way for growth, right? Because you can't just continually inflict that upon yourself and be, so finally you get to the end of it and you go, all right, I'm finally on top of it, I've grown as a person, let's dip back into that because I need to grow again. That's not how, that's just, eventually it's going to break yourself. That's not how, like we're all just mortal, right? So we're not these supermans who can just keep inflicting suffering and keep going. At a certain point, you're just harming yourself. So that, if you want to keep going, that's not the way to do it. Like, yes, as you said, that's probably the most profound way and the most, like, the way that sinks its roots deepest into you. But that's just a consequence. It's not the reason why you go after it. That's just a byproduct. So if you can learn to just live with discomfort and pursue places that you don't belong, or that you've at least said that you don't belong, go into those places, seek them out. And when you seek them out, well, then that will give you the leg up that potentially that you don't have in the life that you're living now.
Thanks for tuning in to the Prometheus Podcast, where we aim to bring the fire back to the people.